Welcome back to the Synapse and the Stoa. I'm your host, John Sampson. Every day, we're hit with a barrage of emergencies. A missed promotion, an unexpected bill, a snarky comment from a colleague, a fight with a partner. In the moment, these things feel like mountains. They feel heavy. They feel life-altering. You're in the thick of it, and the fog is so thick that you can't see the path forward. But what if I told you that most of these mountains are actually molehills? What if the fog isn't the world around you, but a specific neurobiological reaction in your brain that you have the power to override? Today, we're talking about perspective. Not just the glass half full kind of perspective, but the biological architecture of your subjective well-being. We're going to look at why your brain is hardwired to catastrophize and how we can use the wisdom of the Stoics, the metaphysics of Plato, and the latest in effective neuroscience to build what the Romans called an inner citadel, a place of mental clarity that no external storm can touch. By the end of this episode, you're going to have a toolkit. You'll understand how to catch, check, and change your thoughts. You'll learn how to take the view from above, to shrink your problems down to their true size. And most importantly, you'll learn why your perspective isn't just a thought. It's a biological imperative that dictates how fast you age and how well you live. Before we get into it, I want to ask you one small favor. Go ahead and hit that subscribe or follow button right now. It's free and it helps us reach and help more people with these episodes. Let's dive in. To understand why we lose perspective, we have to look under the hood. When life throws you a curveball, your brain doesn't just think about it, it reacts. At the center of this is a tug-of-war between two parts of your brain, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Think of the amygdala as your brain's internal alarm system. Its job is to detect threats. In our evolutionary past, this was a saber-toothed tiger. Today, it's an email from your boss that says, "We need to talk." When that alarm goes off, the amygdala initiates a bottom-up emotional response. It floods your system with stress hormones. Suddenly, your perspective narrows. You get locked in. This is why when you're too close to a problem, you can't see it clearly. Your brain has physically throttled your ability to think rationally. On the other side, we have the prefrontal cortex, the most advanced part of the human brain. This is the CEO. This is where top-down regulation happens. Different regions of your prefrontal cortex help you maintain alternative viewpoints and help you extract meaning from the chaos. The problem for most of us is that the amygdala is faster. It reacts in milliseconds. If we don't have the tools to engage the prefrontal cortex, we stay in that state of hyperactivity. We start using what psychologists call cognitive distortions. Maybe you start catastrophizing, predicting the worst possible outcome based on zero evidence. Or you fall into all or nothing thinking, where a single mistake means you're a total failure. These aren't just bad habits. They're systematic shortcuts your brain uses to simplify a complex world. But in the process, they create a pathological prism. If you stay in this state, it's not just your mood that suffers. Chronic stress from a maladaptive perspective can lead to hypertension, cardiovascular issues, and it even wears down your telomeres, the protective caps on your chromosomes. Literally, a bad perspective can make you age faster at a cellular level. But here's the good news. Through neuroplasticity, we can train the prefrontal cortex to dampen the amygdala's alarm. we can learn what's called cognitive reappraisal, the ability to refit the lens through which we see the world. This isn't a new realization. Philosophers have been trying to help us see clearly for over 2,000 years. Let's talk about Plato. Plato argued that our greatest obstacle to a good life is mistaking appearances for reality. He gave us the allegory of the cave. Imagine people chained in a dark cave, facing a wall. Behind them is a fire, and people are carrying objects across that fire, casting shadows on the wall in front of the prisoners. Because that's all the prisoners have ever seen, they believe those shadows are reality. When you're stressed about a minor bump in the road, you're often reacting to the shadow of the problem, not the thing itself. Plato says that gaining a proper perspective is a painful and disorienting journey out of that cave into the sunlight. It requires us to look past the shadow reality of our immediate emotions and see the forms, the eternal truths of what actually matters. Now, the Stoics, men like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, gave us a sophisticated cognitive architecture designed to insulate the human psyche from the inherent volatility of the world. They wanted to help us build what they called an inner citadel, a part of the soul that remains peaceful, still, and entirely unaffected by the small troubles of the people around us. To build this citadel, you first have to understand the Stoic cognitive theory of emotion. Most of us think emotions are like the weather. They just happen to us. But the Stoics argued that emotions are actually the logical consequences of our underlying beliefs and judgments. If you feel anger, it's because you have assented to the belief that you've been unjustly harmed. If you feel anxiety, it's because you've judged a future event to be both certain and catastrophic. The Stoics teach us that our primary task is not to suppress these feelings, but to investigate the validity of the judgments that created them in the first place. This brings us to the most fundamental tool for maintaining perspective, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, who spent the first part of his life as a slave, realized that while his body could be chained, his will, or faculty of choice, remained sovereign and untouchable. He argued that the beginning of wisdom is drawing a sharp, non-negotiable line between what is up to us and what is not up to us. What's up to us is our opinions, value judgments, desires, intentions, and our decision to give or withhold assent to a thought. What's not up to us is our physical body and its health, material wealth, our reputation, social standing, and crucially, other people's actions. In the Stoic view, these external things are indifferents. They aren't inherently good or bad because they can be lost through no fault of our own. True good and evil reside exclusively in your character and the choices you make. When you stop attaching your happiness to these external outcomes and focus only on your internal response, you become virtually invulnerable. Epictetus took this further with what he called the discipline of assent, the micro-governance of the mind. He described the mind as a faculty that constantly receives impressions, mental images of how things appear to be. These impressions usually come with an automatic label. This is terrible, or this is desirable. Epictetus tells us, wait a while for me, my impression. Let me see what you are. He instructs his students to audit every thought before accepting it. The test is simple. Is the matter presented in this impression up to me or not? If it's external, your response should be, it is nothing to me. This doesn't mean that you ignore the reality of the event. It means you deny that event the power to harm your moral core. When dealing with social friction, use his metaphor of the two handles. Every situation can be picked up by two handles. One you can carry it by, and one you can't. If a brother treats you unfairly, you can pick it up by the handle of injustice, which leads to resentment, or by the handle of brotherhood, which focuses on the shared bond and your duty of patience. Maintaining the right perspective is the active choice to grab the handle that is functional and aligned with virtue. Then we have Seneca, who faced the psychological bondage of extreme wealth and political risk. Seneca believed that a life of uninterrupted prosperity was actually a disadvantage because it left your capabilities untested. He viewed adversity as a gymnasium of life, a training ground for the soul. His most vital contribution to our toolkit today is premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. He advised that we should regularly visualize the loss of everything we value, our wealth, health, and even our loved ones. The goal isn't to be morbid. It's to build emotional resilience and reduce the shock of novelty when things do go wrong. By mentally rehearsing misfortune, you realize that you can survive it and still maintain your virtue. It also has a secondary effect. It creates an intense sense of gratitude for the current moment. As Seneca noted, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And finally, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, used a technique called objective representation to strip the vanity and legend from the things that we desire or fear. He would describe objects in purely physical, unadorned terms to remove their emotional allure. He described his royal imperial purple robes as merely sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. He viewed a sumptuous feast as the dead bodies of fish, birds, and pigs. He even characterized fine wine as just a little fermented grape juice. By turning things inside out and looking at them carefully, he was able to see their insignificance. It prevents the mind from giving these externals too much weight and helps you stay focused on your duty to the common good. Marcus Aurelius also used a technique called the view from above. He would literally imagine himself rising above his immediate surroundings, seeing the city of Rome, then the empire, then the entire earth, and the vastness of time itself. So we've talked a lot about the biology and the philosophy. But how do we bridge that gap? How do we stop being too close to a problem that's staring us in the face? In psychology, we call the negative lens through which we see these moments the pathological prism. The prism is built out of cognitive distortions, irrational, biased ways of thinking that skew our perception of reality. These distortions aren't just bad habits. They are systematic mental shortcuts that our brains use to simplify a complex, fast-paced world. Evolutionarily, these shortcuts kept us alert to threats. But in your modern life, they manifest as a binocular trick, where you magnify every negative detail and minimize every success. When you're in the thick of it, as we say, your perspective gets blurred. You are self-immersed. You see the world through your own eyes, and your emotions are running white hot. This is where the fog comes in. To clear it, we need to master the art of self-distancing. Self-distancing is the process of moving from a first-person immersed view to a third-person perspective, becoming a neutral observer of your own life. Research shows that when you do this, you activate the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. This specific part of your brain is responsible for inhibiting those automatic, knee-jerk emotional responses from the amygdala. You're essentially tricking your brain into being rational by creating a psychological space between yourself and the event. One of the most effective ways to trigger this distancing is what I like to call the friend test. Think about the problem you're facing right now. If your best friend came to you with this exact situation, the exact same setbacks, the same fears, what would you say to them? Would you tell them their life is ruined? No. You'd probably offer a clear-eyed path forward. By adopting the perspective of a friend, you bypass your own pathological prism. You suddenly realize that this isn't an earth-shattering catastrophe. It's just a minor bump in the road. Ask yourself, by doing this, has it altered my perspective? Do I now see options that were hidden by the fog? We also have the concept of decentering from mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. This is the skill of stepping back and observing your thoughts as mental events rather than absolute truths. You aren't your thoughts. You are the observer of your experiences, a concept known in acceptance and commitment therapy as self as context. Think of your mind like the sky and your problems like the weather. The weather can be stormy, it can be foggy, it can be dark, but none of those things can actually harm the sky. The sky is always there, vast and clear beyond the clouds. When you learn to take that step back and remove yourself from the immediacy of the situation, you don't just feel better, you see better. You find the path that leads you out of the thick of things and back into the light. Now I want to get real for a second. Sometimes our problems are real. They are heavy. I'm not here to practice toxic positivity, that dangerous idea that you should just be happy no matter what. Suppression is just a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It leads to higher blood pressure and worsened health. But perspective involves a reality check. Understand that while your struggle is valid, there are people in this world right now who would trade their problems for yours in a heartbeat. There is someone right now wondering how they will put food on the table for their children today. There's someone sitting in a hospital room holding the hand of a loved one as they pass away from cancer. There are families in war-torn countries just trying to keep their babies alive until tomorrow. I don't say this to diminish your pain. I say it to help you find your inner strength. When you consider what other humans are capable of enduring, it reminds you of the common humanity we all share. You are part of a long lineage of people who have faced the impossible and kept walking. There's also the deathbed perspective. When you're lying on your deathbed one day, looking back at your life, what will you care about? Will you care that you got passed over for that promotion in 2026? Will you care that a colleague took credit for your work? Will you care that you were 10 minutes late to a dinner party? I can promise you, none of that will matter. You will care that you spent time with the people you love. You will care that they knew how you felt about them. You will care that you lived with integrity. Most of the internal struggles we deal with are simply not meaningful. If it won't matter in 10 years or on your last day, learn to let it go now. We've covered the biology of the fog, the ancient wisdom of the Stoa, and the psychological tools to distance ourselves from the immediate crisis. But the ultimate goal of the Synapse and the Stoa isn't just to help you survive a bad Tuesday. It's to help you develop a resilient mindset, a permanent architectural shift in how you process reality that will lead to a more fulfilling life. This shift starts with understanding what Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck calls the growth mindset. A right perspective is rooted in the belief that your abilities aren't set in stone. If you have a fixed mindset, you view challenges as a threat to your identity. If you make a mistake, your brain treats it as a personal indictment of your worth. Neuroimaging shows that in a fixed mindset, the brain actually shuts down when reviewing errors to protect its self-concept from the pain of failure. You see effort as a sign of inadequacy. If you have to try hard, it must mean you aren't talented. This leads to career stagnation and chronic stress because you're always trying to prove yourself rather than improve yourself. But when you adopt a growth mindset, you see challenges as opportunities to stretch. You believe your attributes can be developed through persistence and strategy. In the growth mindset brain, we see a significantly larger air positivity waveform. This means your brain is actually more attentive to its mistakes, viewing them not as threats, but as motivationally relevant learning opportunities. You don't see a bump in the road as a dead end. You see it as data. Think about the selection process for the most elite jobs on Earth. When NASA selects astronauts, they don't look for people with pure histories of success. In fact, they often reject those applicants. Why? Because if you've never failed, you've never had to develop the psychological muscles required to bounce back. NASA wants the people who have been through the fire, those who have faced major challenges and demonstrated the ability to recover. That bounce back is the hallmark of a resilient perspective. It's the realization that you can and you will overcome the situation you are in right now. This isn't just a motivational speech, it's a biological fact. Your brain is capable of neuroplasticity, the ability to strengthen and form new neural connections throughout your entire life. While a child's brain has a high passive plasticity, adult neuroplasticity requires intentional engagement and deep work. Every time you catch, check, and change a negative thought, you are physically weakening the pathological prism of the old neural pathways and strengthening the executive control of your prefrontal cortex. You are literally building a more resilient brain with every conscious reframing. I want you to take a moment and think back to the problems you've already overcome. Maybe they were small, maybe they were life-altering. Regardless, you are standing here today because you survived them. This situation is no different. You've overcome challenges before, and this challenge is just the next chapter in your growth. Not only will you survive it, but the experience itself will make you better. It's the gymnasium of life that Seneca talked about. It's where you develop the strength that you'll need for the future. We've covered a lot of ground today. To wrap up, here are the practical steps you can incorporate starting right now to keep your perspective clear during challenging times. 1. The catch, check, and change protocol. Catch the negative thought and the physical tension in your body. Check if it's an absolute fact or a cognitive distortion like catastrophizing. Change the thought to a more balanced, evidence-based perspective. 2. The friend test. When you're in the fog, ask what advice you would give to a friend in your exact shoes. This engages your rational prefrontal cortex and shrinks the problem down. 3. The two handles. Choose the functional handle of a situation, the one that allows you to act with virtue rather than resentment. 4. The view from above. Regularly practice zooming out to see your problems as tiny specks in the vastness of time and space. And 5, audit your mindset. Are you seeing this setback as a threat, which is fixed, or as data for improvement, which is growth? Remember, effort is the path to mastery, not a sign of failure. Perspective doesn't mean life gets easy. It means you get stronger. It means you realize that you aren't a victim of your circumstances, but the architect of your own internal reality. Next time you're in the thick of it, remember, step back, clear the fog. The path is there. You just have to change the lens to see it. Thanks for listening to the Synapse and the Stoa. I'm John Sampson. If this episode helped you, share it with a friend who might be struggling with their own shadows today. Make sure you subscribe, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. That helps us reach more people. You can find our show notes for this and all of our episodes on our website at synapseandstoa.com. And if you're interested in early access to new episodes, suggesting topics you'd like me to explore, or connecting with me directly, check us out on Patreon.